Let's jump right into this, because today we are opening the door to an investigation that is, well, it's as fascinating as it is deeply unsettling. We're looking at a phenomenon that totally defies our standard, textbook understanding of time, memory, and really the human mind itself. It's like a literal glitch in the fabric of our consciousness. And the wildest part? It's something that, statistically speaking, you have very likely experienced yourself.
Okay, let's dive into this. Picture yourself standing somewhere completely, totally ordinary. You know, a grocery store aisle, your friend's kitchen, or maybe you're just looking out your living room window. Suddenly, a totally unremarkable sequence of events unfolds. Someone drops a glass, a really specific car drives by, a certain hyper-specific phrase is spoken, and in that exact microsecond, you are hit with this wave of absolute bone-level certainty. You haven't just been here before, you watch this exact sequence happen first in a dream. It's this sudden surge of sensory dread that just leaves you entirely frozen.
Now, most of us are familiar with the term déjà vu, right? Translates from French as already seen. That's that vague, fleeting illusion of waking familiarity. But what we're looking at today is its far more terrifying counterpart, déjà rêvé, which means already dreamed. This isn't just some vague, fuzzy feeling. No, this is the sudden, jarring resurfacing of a specific, exact dream memory playing out in your waking life in real time. It's like the boundary between the waking world and the dreamscape suddenly just blurs into absolutely nothing.
And look, if you think you're alone in experiencing this, the data tells a completely different story. Recent studies evaluating the frequency of this whole phenomenon found that only 4.8% of people have never experienced déjà rêvé. Think about that. In fact, an estimated 65 to 70% of adults report recognizing a waking scene as something they dreamed in exact detail before it happened. So the vast majority of you watching this right now, you felt this eerie anomaly firsthand.
Section 1. Charting the Dreamscape. Let's take a quick look back.
Because, you see, researchers haven't just recently started looking into this. For well over a century, academics and scientists have been desperately trying to map this madness, trying to understand how the human mind can apparently recall the future. Our timeline kicks off way back in 1867. That's when the Marquis de Saint-Denis documented this premonitory dream phenomenon as a completely distinct, discrete category of human experience in his book. He literally laid the groundwork for the modern study of lucid dreaming. And this slow-burn historical investigation just picked up steam through the late 19th century, drawing in heavyweights like William James and the Society for Psychical Research.
And this brilliantly illustrates that we aren't just talking about folklore or ghost stories here. Academics like Robin Woofit in his 1989 sociological thesis from the University of York realized that reports of the unexplained required really rigorous sociological and linguistic analysis. They needed to take these wild, subjective experiences and ground them in cold, hard, documented reality.
Section 2. The 1894 Hallucination Census. Time to catalog the anomalies.
So this brings us to the first really major institutional attempt to quantify the unexplainable boundaries of human consciousness. I'm talking about the massive hallucination census of the late 19th century. In 1894, Henry Sidgwick and the Society for Psychical Research systematically cataloged 17,000 independently collected case files, which, by the way, are still sitting in the SPR archive in Cambridge today. They set out to prove these anomalies were happening to entirely normal, mentally healthy people. But here is where it gets chilling. Within those 17,000 files, they isolated a subset of 149 cases where the premonitory dream was actually written down or told to a second witness before the waking event occurred. Sidgwick flagged this in an unpublished appendix, basically saying, look, this pre-registration rate is structurally inconsistent with retrospective confabulation. Basically, you simply can't be misremembering it if you literally told someone about it yesterday.
Section 3. Archives of Realistic Dreams. Let's look at the Rhine archives.
Fast forward to the mid to 20th century, and the terrified whispers of the 19th century had turned into just an absolute mountain of data. The sheer scale of the unknown was undeniably apparent. Hidden within the raw dream journal transcripts at the Duke University archives under the J.B. Rhine papers are 3,290 specifically submitted dream cases from a 1952 controlled study by psychologist Louisa Ryan. Now, out of a staggering 15,000 unsolicited spontaneous cases she collected, Ryan found that 7% of her controlled cases included a corroborating witness, someone who confirmed the dream's exact content before the waking event happened. This corroboration rate was so controversial, she was pressured into rewriting the methodology section of her submission to the Journal of Parapsychology twice. 2 times. And those original raw intake forms never publicly released. Ryan was meticulous, though. She drew a hard line distinguishing ordinary, messy dreams from what she called ESP dreams, or realistic dreams. Look, in ordinary dreams, the imagery is bizarre, it's fanciful. But in these realistic, premonitory dreams, the detail in the archives says it rivals that of photography. The vividness and that eerie exactitude are carved so deeply into the subject's memory, it's completely indistinguishable from waking reality.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer mundane horror of these actual accounts. Just listen to this excerpt from Ryan's case 1. The subject dreamed of her mother's friend lying dead on a very specific hide-a-bed, sobbing 5 exact words. The dreamer just couldn't shake it. Then, exactly 1 month later, the event actually happened, but kind of in reverse. The mother died of a heart attack, the friend arrived, assumed the exact position from the dream, and sobbed the exact same 5 words in the exact same tone of voice. No way, right? Just chilling.
And these terrifying anecdotes, they are backed up by some really striking patterns in the data. Across multiple international surveys, including Ryan's own work, the subconscious sleep state clearly emerges as the primary theater for these impossible anomalies. Check this out. Roughly 65% of reported spontaneous phenomena occurred during the dream state, compared to just 35% when we're awake. It's almost like our dreaming minds are just uniquely porous to information that shouldn't be accessible at all.
Section 4. The telepathy experiments. Taking it into the laboratory.
So, with the data pointing so heavily toward the dream state, science decided it was time to stop relying on spontaneous reports. They wanted to force the phenomenon to happen, to capture lightning in a laboratory bottle, so to speak. Enter the Maimonides Medical Center in the 1960s. Funded by Eileen Garrett, Dr. Montague Ullman and his colleagues set up this incredibly ambitious experiment. They actually built dedicated EEG sleep rooms to monitor brainwaves and eye movements, trying to scientifically test the relationship between extrasensory perception and the dreaming mind.
They designed this super rigorous step-by-step methodology to make absolutely sure they isolated the phenomenon from any waking contamination. It went like this. First, a sender, an agent in a completely distant room, concentrated on a sealed target picture. Second, the sleeping subject's brainwaves were monitored until they hit REM sleep. Third, they woke the subject up immediately to record their dream report. And finally, independent judges blindly ranked how closely the dream transcripts actually matched the target pictures.
Well, the results of these screening experiments were deeply complex. The independent judges often scored the matches at just mere chance levels. But, and here's the catch, the sleeping subjects themselves found significantly higher hit rates when analyzing their own dreams. They cited these deep, non-verbalized images and feelings that simply didn't translate to text on a transcript. And honestly, it's a fascinating echo of a later 1990 replication study by cognitive psychologist Ulrich Neisser at Cornell. Published in the journal Cognition, Neisser found that subjects keeping prospective dream journals showed a statistically anomalous rate of next-day scene recognition that his own source monitoring model predicted should be exactly 0. He famously flagged this in his methodology as the number that shouldn't exist, and straight up declined to even theorize about it in print. And to this day, that raw journal corpus held at the Cornell archive still never fully analyzed.
Section 5. A lingering cognitive mystery. How modern science sees it.
Today, modern neurology tries to categorize the phenomenon into this neat, clinical taxonomy. You've got your episodic-like Déjà Rêvé, where you recall a specific dream from a specific date. Then there's familiarity-like, which is more of a vague reminiscence mapped to the medial temporal lobes. And finally, dreamy state, which is this profound feeling of being in a dream while you are wide awake, linked directly to the temporal lobes. Researchers can actually stimulate these lobes electrically and induce the feeling, which supposedly proves its physical roots in the human brain.
So, the crucial point is, modern psychology attempts to frame this whole thing really neatly. They view it through the lens of what they call thin boundaries and absorption. Basically, they categorize it as a memory-encoding glitch, a trait where highly absorbed individuals experience a blending of consciousness states. The theory is that the brain just misfiles a current, waking perception as a past dream memory. Waking life and the dreamscape simply bleed together in a little neurological hiccup.
But honestly, that clinical explanation leaves us with a lingering, deeply unsettling void. We are still left with the one experience almost every single adult has had at least once. Standing somewhere ordinary, watching something unremarkable unfold, and knowing with absolute bone-level certainty that they watched it happen first in a dream.
If neuroscience insists this is merely a memory-encoding glitch, just a trick of the temporal lobe, how on earth do we explain the Duke archives? How do we explain the 1894 census? If it's literally just a glitch in your own isolated mind, why, for a measurable and documented subset of people, is there a physical record proving that someone else already saw it too?